Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Far Cry 5 on the Geforce GTX 750 Ti. For performance monitoring, this time I won't be using cam due to Easy Anti-Cheat, which is the anti-cheat software this game uses, so in the meantime I'll be using MSI Afterburner. So Far Cry 5, I'll be doing 1080p, 900p and 720p. To skip any of those sections of the video, check the description below. So first of all, I'll show you 1080p with the overclocked GTX 750 Ti. I added 200 MHz to the core and 400 MHz to the VRAM. On 900p and 720p the overclock was disabled, so keep that in mind. And well, on 1080p I was able to maintain over 30 frames per second most of the time with the configuration I show here. I had to lower shadows, geometry and vegetation because those were the most demanding settings so far, but the game still looks very good, I have to say. Unfortunately, we don't have a texture resolution option. The game seems to just adapt to what you have or just force the GPU to try and make it work. Not 100% sure on what's going on with that. Then on 900p I use slightly higher settings than on 1080p, and again we're over 30 frames per second most of the time. And finally at 720p I just show you max settings to see how it runs. Usually again it seems to be overcommitting the VRAM amount, so we're going over the VRAM limit, but we don't have a texture quality option. And then I just lower the settings to the minimum to see what frame rate we get at 720p, and we're getting much smoother frame rates, so that's the closest we can get to 50 frames per second, 720p lowest settings. So yeah, the game feels very smooth, but I was expecting way worse from this GPU. Just keep this in mind, this GPU was released in 2014, it's pretty much 4 years old right now. But now I'm going to talk to you about the options menu and my experience testing this game. In the options menu, the two options that gave me the biggest hit to the performance were the shadow option and the geometry and vegetation option. So yeah, so far those two were the ones that gave me the biggest difference in performance. So in order to tweak the game, I just first lowered those like to medium or low, shadows, geometry and vegetation, and then the other options, except in texture filtering, I just lowered them one step down, and that should be enough to get a decent boost in performance. On the anti-aliasing options we have SMAA and TAA. Personally I prefer SMAA since TAA is usually a little too blurry for me, but SMAA seems to be performing better than TAA so far. And the options menu gives you a very good idea on how the things that you change affect the visuals of the game. You have different pictures that show you the difference in the graphics, and it also explains what those options do, but some of them don't explain that well. For example, environment, by lowering that to the minimum you lose the water reflections, the screen space reflections. For some reason we don't have an option for ambient occlusion or textures. The VRAM usage slider is not 100% accurate. Still, with 2 gigs of VRAM GPUs I didn't have much of a problem at all. Some stutters every now and then while trying ultra settings, but by just lowering terrain, shadows and geometry it helped with the stutters. And we also have a frame rate log option from 30 to 144 FPS, another thing that I like seeing in options menus, so we don't need any third-party software. And there's also a resolution slider going from 0.5 to 2.0. That means that it is from 50% resolution to 200% resolution, so if you want to keep your resolution and just crank up the internal rendering resolution to do super sampling or something like that, or even lower the resolution, it's a good option, so your HUD doesn't change sizes and you can read the text. That's something I really appreciate in an options menu as well. And there's also an FOV slider up to 120 degrees. I usually like to keep it at 90, 95, that's what my comfort zone is, but other than that there's a good options menu here. And so far the benchmark tool is a good reference to see what to expect from the performance of the game. It's quite demanding on the GPU, but I saw worse performance on the CPU side in the game itself, especially while just driving around in a very foliage dense area with a lot of trees and some enemies behind me just shooting. And that was enough to drop below what the benchmark tool shows, but it's not a huge difference, so I just recommend to try the benchmark tool. Is usually a good reference, except in on very specific places. So yeah, overall it seems to be performing very well. I wasn't expecting that from a Ubisoft game, but this seems to be very polished so far, at least on the performance side, which is what I'm just showing you here. And this game uses a lot of CPU. I saw a Ryzen 3 1200 with a 3.9 GHz overclock to be just maxed out, same with the G4560. Of course those are not high-end CPUs, but it's good to see that the game can use all the 4 threads just fine, takes advantage of your CPU. But between the G4560 and the Ryzen 3, I saw that the Ryzen 3 was more stable overall, and on the G4560 in some occasions there were more drops below 60 frames per second if you're just targeting 60. Still, it's very difficult to maintain 60s with these two CPUs, but you can still be very close, so in my opinion the game still feels smooth enough, which is what matters. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Seems to have been exaggerated. We heard there was an attempted arrest. The sheriff's office released a statement saying any such action is waiting on legal clarification.
Watching out for me. Turkey! Shit!